Oh my god, finally, a new Star Trek show premiered. It's been what, a whole 4 weeks? I was really getting worried there. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well and welcome back. I am so freaking excited because it is time to review the brand new season 3 of Star Trek Lower Decks. If you are new here on my channel, you should know right up front that Lower Decks is, quite frankly, easily my favorite modern Star Trek show on right now, one of my favorite TV shows on in general right now, and quite frankly, one of my favorite Star Trek shows, period. And that is saying something considering that I'm a huge Star Trek fan to the fact that I have it tattooed on several places on my body. I know a lot of you already know that, but I just want to make absolutely clear how excited I am for this season. Like, oh my god, I love this show to absolute death. It is so fantastic. And if you want to know why I love Lower Decks, I've done several videos on my main channel, so go check those out because I could just extol the virtues of the show. But we are here to talk about a singular episode of the show, and that is the season 3 premiere, Grounded. And just staying spoiler free up front, we'll get into spoilers in the back in just a moment. I'll break down all of my thoughts on each individual scene of the episode, but just right up front, what a great return to this series. Obviously, after the end of season 2, we had a big cliffhanger, and I know a lot of us were really curious to see what this season was going to do so to resolve that. And a lot of the trailers and even the artwork kind of was referencing The Search for Spock, Star Trek 3, and the fact that in that movie, they steal the Enterprise, and so we got a lot of allusions to the fact that the crew is going to steal the Cerritos. And this episode does that really, really well. It kind of plays off of that, but what I really loved about this episode and why I continually love Lower Decks is not only is this episode chock full of references like the Star Trek 3 one, there's also tons of other references to like tons of different things. I mean, Cisco's was in the trailer and things like that, but it manages to also do all those references while also doing some world building in the Trek world as well, while also, most importantly, and what I love this show for, telling a really thoughtful character story that allows the jokes and the weird stuff going on to actually mirror the really intelligent character arcs and character beats and feelings that we have going on for our characters, most especially Mariner in this moment. And I can already tell that there will probably be people who watch this episode who will be like, I think they copped out. I think they didn't really do this storyline in the way they should have. But I actually think the surprise way that this storyline resolves itself towards the end of the episode and how they end the cliffhanger, I think perfectly encapsulates the message of Lower Decks as a show about the lower deckers on Starfleet ship, not the, not the bridge crew or anything like that. This is a show about the lower deckers and what they would feel. And since the show is about that, even though our characters, more than probably most lower deckers, have more connections to the bridge crew, since it's about that, it actually takes that and makes it a character arc and a character feeling. And there's a moment in this story, particularly around Mariner, that I was like, it just hit me in the gut and just reminds me that for all the show's fun and references and geeky, nerdy stuff and like Easter eggs and all that stuff for Trekkies, that what this show is about is just these characters and how well I love these characters. It's why whenever people say like Lower Decks is just a show full of references and it's just like Easter eggy stuff and it's just this nostalgia bait, I'm like, no. Even if you removed all of the Easter eggs and all the references to other show other than just the flat like Starfleet, Star Trekkiness of it all, like they're wearing, working on Starfleet ships, even if you removed all of that and just kept the core of what this show is and these characters, I would still adore this show because this show just makes me love what is uniquely Lower Decks and its perspective on Star Trek and the Star Trek world, and I think it just does so really well. But all that being said, it still has a lot of references. There's one reference in this that I'm like, oh my god, that is amazing. I love it to death. It's so great. So to break all that down, I'm going to get into spoilers. So we're going to break this down beat by beat. So if you have not seen the episode yet, just know I'm about to get into spoilers. But just to wrap this out, a fantastic premiere episode in my opinion. All right, time to break this down, and I'm already going to say this right up front. Every episode of Lower Decks is so dense and jam-packed. There are going to be things that I missed, so I'm just talking about the things that really stuck out to me and I loved and adored about this episode. So just let me know in the comments what thing that I missed that was your favorite, because I'd love to hear it, because there's just so much I want to nerd out about it. So I know I'm going to miss something because I'm very excited to talk about this episode. So we start off the episode with an FNN newscast that reminds us of what happened at the end of season 2 with Captain Freeman having been captured for the destruction of Pac-Led Planet, and we get to see that she's on trial. One reference that I was surprised by that they missed here is that the lawyer was not Philippa Louvois from the episode The Measure of the Man. I actually thought that that's where they were going to go, that the person defending or being against Captain Freeman was going to be Philippa Louvois, but that didn't happen. But it was just, it was like, oh, I thought that was going to be the Easter egg. But I just love the stuff of the ticker at the bottom. All of that was great. And there's also a lot of exposition in this, but also my favorite reference was the fact that when the Cerritos bridge crew was being interviewed about the trial going on, some of the people interviewing them had CBS logos on their badges, which I thought was a fun little in-joke there. But then we cut to Mariner with her father, and I liked seeing that Mariner getting some chance to interact with her father because he's a character we haven't seen her interact a lot with throughout the series, and she's just throwing plants and things at the screen, and he's just like, you can turn those off. I thought this was great. The joke later on where she keeps throwing things, and he's just like, I don't know why I still have breakable things in this office. That was all wonderful. And I also really love the joke about the Golden Gate Bridge. It's like, what is that thing? We fly everywhere. We don't need bridges. Though I will say, she should know better. They put solar panels on those bridges. You see that in other episodes of Discovery and Star Trek Picard. There's solar panels on those bridges, so it's important. It's a good thing. The bridge is being put to use. And also we meet Uncle Les here, who is another Starfleet admiral. And I love those small little world building things that Lower Decks constantly does, that there's a bunch of references, but then there'll also be like new characters pop up and there'll be like little references to just feel like there's more going on in the universe of the show. Mariner having like an uncle who is this guy, and just like those small little world building tidbits I think are great. But the biggest thing from the scene we get is we get Mariner's father saying trust in the system. And obviously, you know, we here out in the real world know that systems can ultimately fail us. And just because, you know, someone did not do something does not mean that they may ultimately not get convicted of something and things like that. And that's reflected in Mariner's reaction of not really trusting the system and who she is as a person who's always been, you know, she likes Starfleet, she loves Starfleet, but she's always been very critical of it. And so that kind of fits her character. So that brings us into the rest of the episode. Then we get the new opening title sequence. Looks beautiful, still mostly the same, except for during the battle sequence, they added, like they did last season where they added more ships, they added crystalline entities to this thing, which was great. I love that. I am so excited to see when this show gets to like season 7 or whatever, to see what this battle looks like in the opening credits, because it's going to be ridiculous if they keep adding to it every season. Then we go and meet Boimler in Modesto. This is clearly a reference to Chateau Picard and Picard being on the vineyard in All Good Things and in Star Trek Picard. So clearly that's what it's referencing here. And Mariner's trying to talk to Boimler to try and get him to try and help her, you know, figure out what's going on with her mother and try to rescue her mother and things like that. And they ultimately come up with this plan to sneak on the Cerritos to get Boimler's recordings of the captain's logs as evidence to try and help her mother. And I thought that this was like a good idea for them to like get on there. It's like not super high stakes. It can be helpful, but it's not like the necessarily game-changing thing, which will lead to more stuff down the line. So I did like the stakes being set here. However, everyone, all the girls on the vineyard coming up to Boimler and trying to hit on him, and him just not getting it, was hilarious. I died every single time with him just misinterpreting them. And it also lends credence to, I know there's a lot of people out there who read Boimler as on the autism spectrum, and this scene certainly plays into that, with him just like not reading the underlying social cues and just taking them literally, like, I don't know how to do these this raisin stuff. I thought that was very good, and certainly plays into that aspect of Boimler being on the autism spectrum, at least that interpretation. But then we get Rutherford and Tendi at Sisko's. This is clearly the restaurant from Deep Space Nine, Benjamin Sisko's father's restaurant that we saw in, I forget the name of the episodes, but the 2 episodes where they came back to Earth on Deep Space Nine, which were 2 of the best episodes of Deep Space Nine, if we're being frank. Anyways, this was great. The restaurant and their conversation, and I'm like, oh, are these 2 on a date? Because they're not officially together yet, I don't think, but there's been a lot of romance between these 2. So this is like, oh, they're on a date. I think that's cute. And then also, and this comes back up as a joke later that made me laugh out loud, but Rutherford's like asymmetrical shirt that reminds me of Jake Sisko's shirts were great. And his joke with the asymmetrical shirt later on the episode just had me rolling on the floor laughing. It's like, oh, my shirt's not asymmetrical enough. Thought that was great. But then we get some more exposition stuff with Boimler and Mariner coming in to try and explain them what they want to do, and obviously they jump on. And I loved like Tendi being excited to want to go and see other things outside of you know, California and San Francisco. The fact that Mariner was like waiting to jump out of the shadows was also great. But the best bit was the Ketracel White Hot, referring to Ketracel White from Deep Space Nine as well. And then Boimler like putting just a little bit on and dying, and the Mariner just putting a shit ton on. And just nothing happens to her. I thought that was hilarious. I loved that. But then we get the crew trying to sneak into the transporter facility, and they wanted to beat up the guy to try and steal transporter to get to the Cerritos. And then it just meets the sweetest old man. He's just everyone's grandpa. He was adorable and so sweet, and they just couldn't beat him up. I always love like adorable characters and moments like that. We also got a reference to a bunch of all the different transporters from over different series, and him knowing what they're there for was also really good. But then realizing that they can go to historical Bozeman, the site of first contact, in order to get up to the Cerritos, which then leads us over to this Jurassic Park-like theme park. We even get the music playing for it, set up around First Contact, obviously referencing the movie First Contact. And we get to see a bunch of little references to that film. We get the Jurassic Park music playing, but most importantly, we get James Cromwell, who played Zephram Cochrane in the movie. They actually got him. That's actually his voice, which was great. And that was so much fun. All the little references were great jokes. But also, I wish to say, it's stuff like this, like, I know it's a bunch of, like, here's a bunch of references, right? Like, here's this reference, here's this reference, here's this reference. But I do like moments like this because it is actually a little bit of world building, too. Yes, it's a place to get a bunch of Easter eggs, but it is also, like this would be something that would exist in the Star Trek world. That they would, like, build a theme park around First Contact. That feels right. And so while it is a bunch of Easter eggs, it is also world building, too. And that's what I love Lower Decks Easter eggs most for, where it has these little Easter egg building, world building moments that you wouldn't necessarily get in something like Discovery or Picard or Strange New Worlds. Like, those shows aren't really going to go and do something weird and ridiculous like this. And plus, they're live action, so they physically probably couldn't very easily. And so the fact that they're able to do it in this show and have it be Easter eggs, but world building at the same time, and show like the everyday life of people in Star Trek's world, like what civilians do for fun. I like those moments. I think it's really cool. But then they go on the Phoenix ride that's there, which is obviously recreating what we saw in the movie First Contact. And I love that it's kind of like a Star Tours-esque type of ride. If you've ever been to Disneyland or Disney World and ever been on the ride Star Tours, which is the Star Wars ride, or one of the Star Wars rides that they have there now. It's one of the older Star Wars rides that they have. The little reference of like Zephram Cochrane speaking on the screen and him being like the pilot of the ship as you ride it. It's all very similar to what Star Tours is in Disneyland, so it made me think of that specifically. So I loved all those references. And then they get on the ride with this random dude named Devin, who just gets called on for the ride as they steal it. And I love the rock and roll music, referencing to First Contact again. And then getting up to the Cerritos and Devin being like, oh my god, I'm off for adventure! That was great. And then when he shows back up at the end of the episode, I was like, I'm on a trek to the stars! Just had me dying with laughter. I loved that guy. He was so good. I adored him. But then we get to Boimler's logs, and we kind of learn that Boimler's kind of ridiculous in them because that's Boimler. My favorite joke was like the fact that he actually does dye his hair purple. It's not naturally purple, which we all kind of figured, but I like the little reference to it there. But Mariner actually being like, no, this isn't going to be good enough, her getting frustrated, and, you know, them seemingly talking her down, but then her shipping them off on the ship, the shuttle, to try and get them back home while she steals the Cerritos so that they're not implicated in her stealing the Cerritos, which does fit like Mariner, something that she would do, not trust her friends to have her back and still not trusting the system. And I love Boimler redirecting it to the Cerritos. I thought that worked well. And then the moment where she steals it and the guys are like looking out the window like, red alert, I thought was also very fun. But then this leads us to the emotional core of the episode, which is Mariner fighting her friends to regain control of the ship, and then ultimately her admitting that she just felt scared because there was nothing she could do, right? And this is what I was talking about earlier, when I feel like this show and this storyline really reflects the ethos of Lower Decks, because this was the emotional core for me, and this scene just hit me in the gut, and it made me feel for Mariner, because she is a character who likes to be in control. She likes to be able to do everything. She likes to make sure everything goes the way that she wants, because she's so competent. Like, she's a competent character. She's used to being able to do what she wants and get what she wants, and ignoring everybody else to get it. And here she has to learn that she can't always control things. And it's a great critique on her character. It's a great arc for her to be on. And I'm sure that's going to be the arc that this season is going to take her on. That she is going to become a character who has to realize, like, she can't always just go off on her own and do what she wants if she wants to be in Starfleet. And ultimately there are things outside of her control. And also she has to learn to trust people. Something that she's been learning to do with Boimler over the past 2 seasons. And now it's becoming much more of a direct confrontation for her. And so I think that fits. But it also fits the ethos of Lower Decks, because, you know, these are Lower Decks characters. They're not going to be the ones that can save the day all the time. They sometimes just have to sit and watch while the bridge crew deals with stuff and hope that it works out. It kind of reflects the season 2 storyline where Rutherford was sort of traumatized by the fact that Shax came back, and he didn't really know what to do about that. And it was just sort of a traumatizing thing for him. And this sort of reflects that. Like, they're lower deckers. They can't always save the day. They don't have the ability or agency to, just based on their positions. And so I think that that kind of fits that perspective really well. And then it's ultimately reflected as we wrap out the storyline, because we do get this bit where these like weird worm things go on the ship and actually create an orgy, which I loved. I know that this episode was probably made, was definitely made and written after the controversy, or before the controversy, I should say, from season 2, where there was a bunch of people like playing like, oh, orgies in Star Trek, where does my thing come to? Without realizing that Gene Roddenberry always loved to have sex in Star Trek. I did a whole series on it. You can go check it out on videos on my main channel about that. But it feels like a direct being like, oh, we're gonna double down on the orgies this season. If you don't think there's orgies in Star Trek, just know there's going to be orgies in Star Trek. And the Starfleet crew believing our lower deckers that they were actually there to help these critters, like, that feels very Starfleet and trusting and like, yeah, we did do it. And then almost getting caught because they're actually telling a lie. But then Captain Freeman coming in and covering for them. And it turns out everything worked out fine. And we get the story of how Freeman was saved. You know, we get Captain Bozeman, who was the character Kelsey Grammer, Frasier himself, played in the Next Generation episode Cause and Effect, which is cool to see him getting a little reference here. And then also Tuvok gets referenced. It was just a cool little story. I was like, ooh, I would love to see that as an episode. But ultimately, it did work all out. Like, Freeman was released, and things worked out. And it turns out the Packlids were the one that did it to themselves to try and frame Freeman. And I you know, this is what I like Star Trek for. Like, ultimately, you know, shows like The West Wing, for example, where it's always like, yeah, America, great and perfect. I don't like shows like that as much as I love, like, Aaron Sorkin's writing style. You know, there's obviously problems with America and American institutions. I'm not going to make a doubt about the fact that I'm a leftist and have issues with American institutions. But, you know, it was something like Star Trek. These are institutions that we're supposed to trust. And yes, there's critique of like, oh, are we supposed to trust Starfleet when it is so very like a idealistic version of America and American nationalism, and shows like Discovery and Picard have kind of broken that down in interesting ways, for better or for worse in some people's minds. But here it is like, no, like, this is a system that we can trust in, and I do like seeing that in the Starfleet world, the system can work for people. And in no small mention, the fact that Captain Freeman's a black woman, you know, that's part of that too. I don't think that was like an overt choice or intention, but it's just like, that is nice to echo there, that the system does work for a black woman, when in the United States that is not always the case. So just, again, not the direct social commentary that the show was going for, but it's just something that made me think about and I did like to see. But again, this fits the lower deckers, right? It fits Mariner. Like, this is something she has to learn. And it seems like this is going to be the arc of her character this season, because at the end of the episode, Captain Freeman says, like, Ransom is going to look at her to try to determine she should stay in Starfleet. So she's going to have to learn to follow orders and follow the crew, something that she has not learned for the rest of the series so far. And I like that for her character, like, needing to learn that as a character, and having to focus in on that. And this is a great episode to start her off on that, to show, like, not everything's in your control, and you need to accept that. And sometimes you need to listen and hope and just let the system do its thing. I think ultimately is a idealistic message in some senses, given what I just talked about American institutions, but also a great one for her character to learn too. So it's a story I think only Star Trek could tell, and again, only Lower Decks could tell too. And so I think that's really good. I really like it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Star Trek Lower Decks season premiere. I think this was, again, a really strong episode. I know some people may cop out and think like, oh, the Lower Deckers should have had some agency in being able to save the Upper Deckers, but honestly, I don't think that's the case. I think it better fits the show and these characters that that's not what happens. So yeah, I think it's really, really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I am so excited that Lower Decks is back. I am looking forward to more of this season and this show. And yeah, we'll enjoy episodes together. Lower Decks is back, baby! All right, love y'all. Live long and prosper. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see y'all with the next episode of Lower Decks and whatever show else I'm reviewing at this time. Probably She-Hulk or whatever's next. So many shows premiering. House of the Dragon, all that jazz. I'll be reviewing on this channel. Otherwise, see y'all later.